But yeah, you just have to like be okay doing it, balancing everything. But like by balancing everything, that means your sanity. Like
Right.
I remember at one point I had 9 Inch Nails playing and BTS on YouTube.
All right. So, welcome back to another episode of The Work. My name is Curtis Matzke. I'm a writer-director, and I'm here with...
Hi, I'm Lele Park. I am also a writer, but I am not as good a writer as him.
All right. Well, we'll see about that. But this is obviously our ongoing series about film and filmmaking with different Chicago creators, writers, filmmakers, what have you. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about success. And we had another episode in this where we actually talked to Robert about failures. So that was interesting. But I think similarly, there's this kind of, I don't want to say stigma, but not as many people like openly talk about some of their successes and accomplishments in a certain way. There's a little bit of like, shame, and you don't want to like necessarily annoy people, and there's different levels of it. And I was also thinking recently in preparation for this about like the Mark Duplass, South by Southwest talk that everyone, from a few years ago that everyone talks about how the cavalry isn't coming, and you have to kind of like, even if you get into South by, or even if you sign with an agent or all these other things, like it isn't a deal breaker that you're set for the rest of your career, right? So I want to talk to you about a lot of that stuff and kind of how you like navigate your own career, but how would you initially define success for yourself, like as a storyteller, like in a broad sense?
So you said that the last episode was about failure. This one's about success. What do you had on Robert Carter? My
Yeah.
buddy Robert, my
Yeah.
boy. Okay, so really, what should have happened was you should have switched these guests. He should have been here, and I should have been in the other one. But that's fine.
They're the same sides. They're two different sides of the same coin. Is the thing. You can't have one without the other.
Right. I am happy to be the puddle he steps in any day. So success, I mean, again, that, like he said, it's such a broad term. For me, it's meant so many different things. It's just been about at different points of the journey. Like when I very first started, I thought success was just placing in like a mid to low level competition, knowing that I'd maybe gone up against like maybe like 1,000, 2,000 people. I was like, oh, that to me that was success. But then enough of that. Then it became like, oh, did I place in maybe in like a mid high tier competition or festival? And then after that, it was more like, oh, did I network with some people that could open doors or that gave me insight that was worth learning from. The success. It's not like I've won an Oscar. My bar is down here. It's more basement. But I've definitely had some positive wins along the way, and it's definitely been octane in the days where I'm just, screaming into empty Dorito bags and eating donuts by myself at my keyboard. So yeah, I mean, success is broad.
Do you ever like go back and like, oh, I had a pretty good year because I placed in this many competitions, or I had this kind of thing go off?
So yeah, I mean, if I'm just really brutal with myself about it, I didn't know I'm not like you. I'm not as brilliant and attractive, but I really sort of began the whole thing. I think just as like a leap of faith. And I only started it a few years ago. I put something together that I heavily researched and really was labor intensive, but then I only started competing in 2018. And I placed in the first thing I entered. And then I basically thought, well, someone, and the reason I even entered at all is because a couple people that were far more senior than me said, look, like, you're new and you're not going to place.
Wow.
They're like, you've never done anything, and you don't know what you're doing. And also, they were also honest just about the logistics of it. Like, even in a small competition, because the internet's made it so much more accessible than maybe it was just like, 20 years ago or something like that. You might get hundreds, if not thousands, of people entering a small competition. And so just to place, is not in your favor, generally speaking. So I did it just to see what would happen, and I placed. And so then I was like, well, let's just kind of see what happens. So I think I entered, I don't remember, I think it was like 18, maybe 20. Actually, all right, I'm lying. It was closer to like 30 competitions. And I placed or won in all of them, but like one or two.
Which is crazy.
So then I felt affirmation that like maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. But even with that, along the way, peppered in there are conversations with people that feel, that maybe feel jaded at times. People that have had horrific experiences, people that tell you you're never going to make it because you're in Chicago, you're an Asian, you're a girl. The people that can't see past paint color when they watch like home renovations. And they just put a lot of negative barriers there, and you kind of try and tell yourself delusionally that you can do it.
When you have like these laurels to share or whatever, you have to share them, and you have to be like, hey, I'm still out here doing stuff, and remind people that you're out there, but it still feels weird. And then I also like wonder if it is more difficult if you're like a woman or a person of color, like trying to, remind people who might not look like you to get over their, bullshit and
So
talk.
I'll answer that in kind of like a two-parter. One, like, how do you stay relevant, or at least try to stay relevant into people's conversations? But the other thing, is it difficult? I would say it is difficult just because of the fractions. I mean, the number of us versus, say, the number of opportunities and what's out there and the people that are already there, right? But it is different now. There's definitely a more positive lens on it right now than there was even just, say, those 2 years ago, back in 2018. I mean, I'm not going to use a name, but there was a producer that I met out in LA, and he was very frank with me. He said, I loved your material, loved it. Downside, you're a girl, you're Asian, and they're not going to let you make your show.
Holy shit.
And that was at dinner. I was excited to be at that dinner.
Yeah, you were at a meeting.
Words fell out
directly to you. That's crazy.
Yeah. And that experience, it was so horrible because I was so excited to be there. I was like texting my friends being like, he's on his way and he's parking his car. We're going to have this amazing time. And he's going to like, hopefully introduce me to some cool, or give me cool advice and whatever. And then he walks in and he's just like, sorry. Right. You go home and you cry into that Dorito bag, and then you say, okay, but buckle down, make more content anyway.
Right. Yeah, again,
but you try to tell yourself that he doesn't know what he's talking about, even though he has like 12 years more experience than you. And you tell yourself that just because he knows like 5 famous directors doesn't mean he knows the trends of what will happen with race and culture and the industry.
Yeah, the old guard.
And it's hard to stomach a little bit. But now it's so turned over. It's the other side of the coin now. And there are people that are like, look, honest with you, I've never had an Asian writer present this kind of thing to me. Would you be interested in being read or whatever, blah, blah, blah. They're at least making the concerted effort to, I think, make it more of a rainbow in terms of what they've got sitting on their desk. And also part of it is the learning perspective. Like there are cultural differences sometimes in just the vernacular of how we write, the way we read things, the way we process things, like an SAT test. So yeah, it is different. Right. But for right now, I definitely feel like there's a more concerted effort to not just inclusion, but to keep an eye on exclusion. as far as trying to stay relevant, or at least to wedge myself into conversation and relationships, well, that comes down to stalking, and embracing the idea that someone's gonna say to you, I'm not interested, you know, piss off or leave me alone, and being somehow in here okay with that, knowing that that's already where you are. You're already at baseline, you have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just try to talk to this person or get on the radar, they're gonna, if they say no, fine, you're exactly where you are. And if they say, sure, I've got 5 minutes, then you're like, okay, and you can jump into something. Again, not going to say his name, but there's this guy, he's, won an Academy Award. We were able to be at the same place at the same time, not because I was talking, because we were at the same place at the same time.
Sure.
But then just through a couple circumstances, I was in a position where I needed to email him some pictures that I'd taken of him with some other guests. And in doing so, I then was like, hey, would you be interested in like chatting sometime? You could kind of sense that he was like, oh God, she seems like a nice person. I'm not a bad person. I guess I could like be nice and civil for 2 minutes. And to his credit, he gave me those 2 minutes. And then I asked him for more advice, and then he gave more advice. And then he actually was like, actually, this is what you're doing wrong. You should try and do this. And it's ballooned now where he's actually kind of like my go-to mentor. Like I'll call him at 1 a.m. and be like, so how does this thing work? Or what do you think I should say? And he's there for me. And it's turned out to be this great relationship. And during COVID, he, we'd do virtual dinners and virtual kind of like touch bases and writing sessions. And then before COVID, went out to LA and met up and, just spent 3 hours telling me about experiences he'd had, which helped me understand what my baseline really should be. So to go back to your question, how do you stay relevant? You just try to not be afraid of embarrassment, shame, and feel comfortable with rejection, because that's the inevitable no matter what. Your creativity isn't a direct route for promotion. If you go to college and want to be a banker, like there's a kind of a direct route to make that happen. There is not a direct route.
Yeah, you can't try and tell someone
else. Be comfortable. Be very comfortable with rejection. Be very comfortable with feeling embarrassed. I reached out to someone on Instagram and they were so nice to me. And then when I was in LA, they took me out for coffee, and this person had been on 2 really high profile shows as a writer, knew a ton of people, and I just wanted to learn from her, and she was very cool. On the flip side, someone else I equally reached out to was like, don't you ever message me again. And I was like, sounds good. You just... But you know what? For the person that says, yeah, I'll give you 20 minutes over coffee, and maybe it turns into more, or the other person that's like, no, I'm up here and I don't have to talk to you. I can just post prolific things on my Instagram. You'll filter those out. Right. And, you just don't take it too personally.
So you talk about this like one meeting that you went to that you had these expectations for, and then you think like that alone is like going to be like your path. You're like, oh, I'm just having this meeting means like I've made it, right? Or like, but, and then it all goes to shit. But then you run into this other guy and you have this long-term, relationship and friendship.
And the person that I met, again, like I said, won an Academy Award, couldn't be nicer.
Right.
Has never been like, do you realize it's 1 a.m. when you're asking me this? Has never said that to me. Has just been like, all right, like, the other day, I had some good news. I called him and I was just like, so this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? How does it compare to what your experience was? And he literally was like, let me look at my whole last 1 to 2 years of calendar dates so I can give you an expectation of what the rhythm was for all my appointments. And I was just like, I'm so sorry. I realized this is so late. But I wasn't sorry. I said that, but I wasn't sorry. Like the nicest, just like the nicest person. And in exchange of that, though, I have actually paid it forward. If anyone's ever come to me and been like, hey, do you mind reading this thing? Not only have I read it, on occasion I'll be like, hey, do you want to do a Zoom? And we will walk through every single page, because if people are willing to cut that pie slice of time for me, I have to cut equal pie slices for everyone else. And so, yeah, that's kind of how you stay relevant, though, is by, or not, I don't want to say relevant, but stay on people's radar, is just, again, feel comfortable with rejection, but also pay it forward for the people that, you know, have done well for you.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you that too, if you mentored anyone else yourself through stuff, but like.
Yeah. So I was invited to speak at Bucknell University and for a writing program, screenwriting program. And I met some nice students, and then, you know, I gave them my email address. I said, if you want someone to talk to, or if you have some very basic low bar questions, because that's me, you know, reach out. I'm there for you. And they did. And so, you know, in particular, one girl, she was like, hey, I've got this script. I don't know what I'm doing, but I feel like I know what I'm doing. And so she sent it my way. I read it once, then I read it a second time. And then I finally just reached out to her. I said, and she was keeping up with me over Instagram. And I finally reached out to her. I said, look, like, let's just walk through every single page. And she actually had a really good script, but you could tell that, you know, she was just on the cusp of feeling like she'd found her voice.
Sure.
And so I just kept telling her, like, feel confident in it. Like, don't pull back. Right here, you could have gone here. And you pulled back a little. Like, don't pull back.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
I think doing that kind of thing too, like I've done that a little bit with other people as well, and given feedback and try to work through as much as I can. But I also think that like that makes me a better writer too. Like just going through that process and like, you know, not obviously you feel good about yourself too. Obviously, like, oh, I'm helping people, but it does actually improve your own writing if you can. And this, like, I've done some like reading for like Austin and stuff like that. It's the same kind of mentality, just being exposed to like just more voices and more approaches can really make your own stuff more interesting.
Well, and like, you know, it was kind of fun to read her material, not just because, I mean, sure, it's like you feel like you're paying it forward, whatever. Those things don't make
from your own writing.
But like, because, I mean, she was really good. I even told her, I was like, this line here, I might take that. I don't know. Like, I mean, she was really good. And I felt honestly inspired by her because everyone's a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And I think instead of looking at it as I would do it differently, which is why I think one of the worst things editors or polishers do is like how they would do it. Just accepting that it's her dress. She knows how she wants it to look on her. Let me just help you get it to be your vision.
Do you consciously kind of set those goals early on in like the year or whatever? Do you have like a calendar?
Yes.
Like, okay.
Yeah. Oh, my calendar is disgusting. If anyone saw my calendar, they'd be like, she's crazy. I have color-coded blocks of time. I mean, I'm a calendar wizard. I enjoy actually updating my calendar. I'll be like, oh, it's Friday night. Let's get a sandwich and update that calendar. I wish I was kidding. Anyway, so this, like, I would say for 2019, for 2018, my goal was just to win or place high in like a legitimate competition or festival. And I did that, you know, sometimes, a bunch of times. And then in 2019, my goal was to get a manager and to have one actually like select me without it being a big deal that I'm not in LA. And I did that. So I got that done. And in 2020, my goal was to get an agent. And I've done that now.
Just briefly, the Chicago-ness of it. Do you define success within this scene differently than like like overall, or like with LA? Like obviously a lot of these connections are coming from LA, right?
Everything for me was supposed to come from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And everything wound up coming out of LA. Everything went in the reverse of how everyone told me it was going to go. So that's been different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I live here. I live in this incubator of talent. You know, it's the most walkable city in the world. And I would say other than just like maybe 2-3 people here in Chicago, everyone that wants to connect with me, to talk with me, to hang out or get a dinner or a virtual coffee or whatever, they live in LA. And so it's been the reverse experience for me. I mean, I wish Chicago folks were like, hey, let's do a virtual coffee or dinner, but it's been mostly LA.
Interesting. But yeah, it's hard to find those kind of pathways here and go. I mean, now things are even more open up. So like your experience seemed pretty like unique early on as far as like getting these distance relationship going. I mean, I know you go out to LA as well, obviously, but now since a lot more things are virtual, a lot of those are broken down even further, possibly. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, before the amazing cuteness of COVID, um, the experience though, for me at least, was the same despite what I was told. So I was told from the beginning, you don't live in LA, you want to do movies, TV. Again, you don't live in LA with the triple asterisks. Girl, Asian, no experience, working mom, the day job that is full-time, of course I have like all that volunteer work. Like it's just, people would tell me constantly, this is going to be too much for you. You should re-angle or realign your goals. Like they were like, instead of maybe working TV, maybe you could be like a PA when when a shoot comes to town, or instead of wanting to, polish studio scripts, maybe you could be like, a reader for a competition at home. Like everyone kept trying to readjust what my goals should be based on geography and other factors, obviously life factors. I'm really naive, really mature. And I was just like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. They can take their decades of experience and I'll show them. Because mainly what they kept telling me was, you're not going to get represented, and you're certainly not going to get it for TV or film. So I was like, all right, that sounds like a good time. But they were wrong, so there you go. But on the flip side of that, I was told that there was this amazing, Chicago community, and it seems fickle in what the feedback is. Some people have said to me the Chicago film community is tremendous, and I do see some really incredible stories online. But on the other hand, like I said, when I'm out doing well and I hear from other people, I would say it's never from someone in my own community. It's always from the people in LA.
Interesting. Yeah, it is always a question with Chicago, as like why do people move out of Chicago? Because it is almost like, in terms of success, at least this is how it's perceived by a lot of people, maybe me, maybe not, is that you do kind of hit a wall as far as like how far you can go with your career. So then, like I know that actors have had this dilemma. It's like, okay, I got booked on Chicago Fire, Chicago PD. Now what? So I guess I'll just move to LA. Like what is the top tier of like success that you can get within one city outside of LA? But as a writer though, there's always that mentality like I shouldn't have to live in LA.
What's the internet for if not to make sure I don't have to go to LA? The truth is that I would fly to LA. I have horrible fear of flying. Like I'm like vomitacious, white knuckle, stand up and tell people we're gonna die level of fear of flying. And I started flying out there because I started, fortunately and unfortunately, getting meetings. And so they're like, oh yeah, just flying out. I'm like, okay. And so I'd go out there and I would meet people, and people were nicer for the most part, not nicer versus Chicago. Nicer than I thought they were going to be. Other than that horrible guy. And, my friends, I have a great network of girlfriends that have nothing to do with film or TV, but that could recognize that I wanted this really badly and would kind of rally and push with me and in fact fly with me to make sure I got on the airplane, because that's how unreliable I was to actually get on the airplane. And with Chicago though, like I said, it's so tough. For me, it's been so tough. Like, I'll see all these cool things out there and I'll hear nothing from anyone. And then like with film class, like unless it's like with you, I kind of don't really hear a lot of stuff. So, you know, I'd love to be more involved in what's happening here, and put my hands more on it. But I mean, I wouldn't even honestly at this point know where to start, because I don't know if it's just a culture thing, but the people in LA seem more outgoing to be like, hey, I saw you did this thing. Would you want to do virtual coffee sometime? And in Chicago, it's like, hey, who are you?
Yeah, it's tricky, which is weird because you'd think it would be the opposite in many ways. But but like, so the question is like, okay, so are those people in LA saying that to you like genuinely, or are they just like looking for the next benefit?
Oh yeah. I mean, and what I've been thrilled by it.
Like, you're like, all right, if you want to use me, I'll use you in return. Like, it's all just whoring.
It's role reversal. Then I'm saying to them, how dare you, don't ever contact me again. But no, I don't think that there's, by being in Chicago, I mean, it depends on what you want to do, obviously, and the goals you want to set. But I don't know if your goals have to change, or if what you're willing to do has to change. Like, I don't want to get on an airplane. But if someone says to me, look, we'll let you live in Chicago, but you're going to have to fly out to LA once a quarter or once a week, are you okay being bi-coastal?
Yeah, you just have to kind of make.
It just depends on what you want to do. And it also depends on what you're, I mean, I hate saying like the deal, but it kind of is like the deal. If someone says to you, hey, we have a studio that's going to let you polish a script, you can do that from home. That's great. No problem. Home is wherever I want to be with an internet connection. But if they said to me, hey, we're staffing you for a TV show, for a drama series, you're going to have to be with us. Then you either choose to go bi-coastal, or you choose to move. Or if you're crossing your fingers and COVID's still happening, you're just virtual in a room. And that's, I mean, I can't like deny this, but I mean, initially before COVID, I would get meetings with people in LA virtually or over the phone or something, like maybe 3 or 4 a month. And once COVID hit and no one could fly, I think it was like March 13 or 14. I would say my meeting list went up to maybe like 20, 30 a month.
Wow. That's crazy.
Because the difference between me and the other writer down the street, how they were going to meet that person was exactly the same. We were just going to Zoom in.
Yeah, and then everyone gets like used to having to do it.
Well, so what I did was, you know, just because I'm a data junkie, I was looking at the influx, because everyone said to me as soon as COVID hit, that's it. No more Hollywood. We're not going to get any more meetings. Get shut down, and you're in Chicago on top of it. You'll never see anyone at daylight again. And but it was the complete reverse. I had more meetings than I could handle, while trying to juggle all kinds of things. Like I said, those darn roommates are actually 2 tiny human beings. Homeschooling them, day job, I volunteer refugee work, like just everything was at once. And so it's like, well, here we go. I've got 20 meetings in 2 weeks. What am I going to do? And I realized that if I was going to try and get an agent, because that was my goal for the year, but COVID was kind of denting it up, I thought, well, this is that time, because everyone's going to be looking at who you are and not your geography right now. So I really doubled down and I went crazy with networking. Stalking. I mean, I'm from the Midwest. We call it stalking, but in LA they call it hustling. So I went crazy with hustling, and again, I don't look at any of those things as opportunities for work. I look at them as opportunities from learning from other people's experiences, so that I can improve my game. But yeah, just I hauled ass. I mean, I was like, okay, if I can do 20 meetings without even trying, if I just haul ass a little bit, can I get up to like 40? Can I get up to 50? And so April, May, June, July, August, I hauled ass. I was cranking. I was taking meetings up until I think like 11 at night.
So we talked about mentors and stuff like that. Is there anyone else whose career you've looked at as far as like who you model your own off of as far as like success and like, you know, how they kind of, whether it's broke in or, you know, reach these certain goals for features or, and like, and how important to you is just like that? I mean, it's not important, but like comparison to other people, because that's definitely a rabbit hole you can go down to when you, after a while, start comparing your own successes to the successes of other people at different levels. But is there anyone out there that kind of comes to mind, maybe? Or
Yeah, I mean, there are screenwriters that are obviously like my idols, but the path they had was so different. I mean, I didn't get great grades. They did. Most of them had master's degrees. That is not me. I mean, unless you have a master's degree in like eating sandwiches, then I do. If I ever wanted to follow in their footsteps, it also would have been very different because of the roles we play. You know, they were not fixated on raising 2 kids while working that day job and homeschooling them during COVID. So I would say, while I do have those people that would like to imitate or mimic their path, it's just not possible. I'm female, they're all male. I'm Asian, they're all white. And most of the screenwriters color that I like, they didn't have that path either. So, you know, it's I don't want to say hardships, that's not right, but it's just different obstacles. So the path I plan to take, or I hope to take, is one that will allow me to continue to be a good mom to my 2 kids and to provide a certain standard of life, and where I can, on a merit level, prove that I should work consistently and not have those fallout 6-9 months where you're like, what am I gonna do? Oh no, just eat sandwiches. So, you know, or play World of Warcraft. I don't know who does that. I do. So just, yeah, like that.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's definitely hard to, like look at all these other people's accomplishments and kind of compare, like trying, like you always want to have like a little bit of a strategy, but it has to be your own strategy. It's like have a plan, but then go with the flow, right? Like, because you just don't know what opportunity is going to arise when, and you just have to, you know, navigate it accordingly. I mean, I've tried to get a little bit better about talking to certain people in the way that you've been able to, like, you know, just, you know, unabashedly annoy people, as you say. But it is kind of the thing where, like, at the end of the day, like, I had this conversation with another friend about how a lot of the filmmaking process, but particularly writing, I think, when it comes down to it, it's all the same stuff. You're still working with, you know, the same materials. You're still in the same program, and it's just you want to like add these levels of that kind of like separate you from other people and think like, oh, I'm not on that person's level, but like not really. I mean, the distance between you and the person you mentor and the person that's mentoring you, like, not all that drastically different is the thing.
I think, going to what you're saying, also part of it comes down to how do you perceive the things that are positive that have actually happened to you. So if you view the things that have happened to you as a positive, and you're just grateful for those moments and those experiences, that cash money and the people you got to meet, that's great. But if you view it as a tier that put you then therefore above someone else, or the people that are trying to climb up, or below the people that have done more, that's a divider that's uncomfortable, because the reality is you can be an Oscar winner. You can, I mean, I have, like I said, one of the girls I met, she'd been on 2 very successful, very high profile drama shows. And you know what? After one of those shows, the last one ended, she didn't work for 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because she didn't want to. It's because, you know, especially if you're talking TV, you're on that show for this much time. You don't write the show for a whole year. You don't write the show for 5 years unless, and even then, if you do, like, that's great, but they don't write it the whole year. They write it for, like, I don't know, like a quarter, half a year. And then after that, you know, you still have to find other things to do if you want things to do. And so I can be looking for work, and someone who just came off of a staffed show who's got nothing to do for another 6 months can be looking for work.
Yeah.
So instead of looking at it as a divider of I've worked and you haven't, I think it's just healthier to say I was grateful to have that work. Now I'm, you know, we're all on the same team.
So would you define broadly again success as kind of, it's not necessarily like that one thing, right? It's not selling a show and having it produced. It's, you know, it's not, you know, this one thing. It's like you are kind of talking about like a career where you're still doing things throughout, whether they're, you know, necessarily like a, I don't want to say tangible thing, like a show produced or whatever. But as long as you're keeping up with it consistently, is that how you kind of describe it? Or
I mean, consistent work, that's glorious, right? And I wish that for everyone. But I do think that that's unreasonable. I think that that's a great goalpost if you really like constantly moving goalposts. You know, the odds of constantly working all the time and every year are small. You're gonna. I was talking to my mentor recently, and he's, you know, he was saying to me, I'll have like 70 to 100 meetings in a year, and 3 to 5 actually translate into dollars. And it wasn't a negative. I mean, those 3 to 5 gigs for the year set you up for, you know, and can prop up a very wonderful lifestyle. But again, that's appreciating the fact though that the other 95 meetings you had translated into $0 and
right.
nothing.
It's kind of like that, you know, the failure side of it. Like when you submit to film festivals, you get rejected from, you know, 90% of them, but then you get 10% of them, and that's, you know, what's helpful. But like,
but
yeah.
The success thing, I'm sorry, to what you were saying though, is would I love to have a show that's just made and I'm just, you know, showering in dollars? Yeah, who doesn't? But that's not because of screenwriting or filmmaking. That's because that's what every person's dream is, right?
Right.
But for as far as like tangible and feeling satisfaction and feeling like some of the grit translated into like real juice, like it's I would say that right now for me, the goal I wanted to meet for 2020, luckily, it was met. I had a very specific goal. It was met. And I was told I would never get it. So I'm really happy right now. But next year for 2021, my goal will be different.
You have to enjoy the process to a certain degree. Obviously, you're juggling a lot of things, and that sounds kind of terrible. But but you can't just be seeking that like one, you know, like we talked about earlier, like that one thing that validates you or makes you legitimate, this external source or whatever. You have to know that it's a long game.
It is a long game. I mean, so I'm really grateful because, you know, I've signed with Verve, and that's awesome. They're really great people. And they put me in a situation where now I'm essentially been given a team of agents. So I think I have 4. I have 4. And, you know, they split me between the TV and the film side. And my goal was to get one junior agent at, you know, a mid-level firm. And so I definitely got to exceed my goal for the year. But now that doesn't mean I can coast. Just because you got people out there that are, I guess, in tandem hustling with you, doesn't mean you can relax. You know, that's really the time when you say, okay, so now we got more of a 4-headed monster here, plus me. We can do even more. versus just saying they've got it. You know, the people that get managers or agents and think that's it, I made it, we're all set now, they're going to find that work and bring it back like it's, you know, a dog getting a bone. That's not really a great way of thinking about it. That doesn't make a partnership. So even though I exceeded what my goal for, I guess, for 2020 was, my goal is also though to see them succeed with me. So it's crank time, you know. I'm actually working probably harder than I was before them. And even today I got like 4 emails, like machine gun fire, of them asking, could you do this thing? Could you change this thing? And I was like, okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
And you just make it work.
Yeah, and that's like, I mean, it seems like now also because of like COVID, but like everyone's so much more busy, you know, than normal too. But like, yeah, once you get that marker, like signing or whatever, like I've heard of people who've gotten like signed, and then I actually never heard of them doing anything again. So I'm like,
Yeah.
was that your goal? Was that really the end goal, end game?
Yeah, if your only goal is to get a manager, or if your only goal is to get an agent, or both, I guess, in my situation, like that's not the end game. The end game is to be employed.
To not have to have your day job or do things you don't want to do, or
Yeah, the end game is really to be employed and consistently employed. Like I've been trying. My friend was telling me, or my mentor was telling me, he said, you know, you do those like 90, 100 meetings, you get like 3 or 5 that actually are going to pay you, but that should be enough work and money to like give you a pretty solid life. So don't feel bad about the 95 other people that reject you in that process. That's the norm.
right.
Just get comfortable with it. Don't take it personally. But to get those 100 meetings, you have to hustle still. Your agents have like 30, 40, 50 other clients that are way more important than you, which is how I view it. You should be a team player.
At what point do you like try and analyze your own success during the process, whether it's like, you know, as you're writing a project or once it's done and then you do have a kind of like accomplishment, or like how do you define that kind of thing? It's kind of like a weird, like, you know, like you say, you set goals for the upcoming year, but like do you kind of look back and analyze certain aspects?
Yeah, so I think the measure, basically you're asking me about the measure of success. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you that it's so difficult because it's so fickle. It's like it's subjective. I had someone read my script and they were like, this is awful. This is awful. I didn't even want to read past 40. I had literally the same draft go to two people that are way higher level. And they were like, this is amazing. This is incredible. Success is the same way.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, like my next goal is to turn out a great script and to have somebody say, I love it. That's great. But that, you know, other than my mom, I would love for that to be someone like you, or someone, you know, that I respect. But, you know, there's always that risk that you could be like, hey, so I read your stuff. Let's go get a sandwich. It was not great. You just, this whole thing about success to me, it's so fickle, and it's because the bar is always moving, and because your standards always change, and because the quality of your work is never going to be. Some people are like, oh, I churn out perfect scripts every time. Those people are liars. They don't. Some projects are great. Some projects are not. There's a director I love. Again, not going to say his name because I will meet him someday. But like put out 3 movies. I was like, those are amazing. And then he put out 2 movies. Like, what? Oh, God, what was that?
Yeah,
it's he's successful. Well, if millions of dollars is successful, then absolutely. Were those 2 movies kind of piles? You know, yeah.
Yeah, you think about it like him as like anyone as like as a person, are they successful? Is the project successful? Like, does it? And it depends on so many factors. It depends on, you know, the timing and everything else, like the release date. You know, where are we talking, like financial? You know, or just like audience perception? thing. It just,
Well, and you know, there are so many other factors for me on a personal level. Like I said, being a mom,
yeah,
taking care of these 2 little kids that don't chip in for rent. I love those little rugrats. Making sure they're okay and making sure that I'm giving them the best quality of life. That's important to me. I love donating my time to refugee causes. Very important to me. So if soup of all those things with screenwriting is in a place where I can feel like the juice was worth the squeeze, success.
awesome. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? I mean, thank you so much for having such a good conversation with me.
I'd just like to say to all the screenwriters out there, there's no direct route. If anyone says there is a path A, they're liars. Burn and blaze that contact. Do your own thing. Do it the way it has to be done to make it work for you.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Talk to you later.